Welcome back. This is the book that we are discussing. This is the book. This is a book called Beautiful Country, Stories from Another India. With me here in the studio, I have Member Planning Commission, Dr. Syeda Hameed, and journalist, social activist, officer on special duty at Yojana Bhavan. Okay, Gunjan Veda is here with us. Syeda ji, Manipur. Let's talk a little bit about Manipur. You actually met with those women who, in order to protest against the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, disrobe themselves. They reveal their nakedness to the whole world to protest against what they believe is an unfair law. Now, you are the establishment in Delhi as member of the Planning Commission, even if others may look on you as a social activist. What did they tell you? What did they tell you? I mean, how do you react to their views on, say, the repeal of the Armed Forces Special Powers Act?
See, we were all shaken up by what happened to Thanjam Manorma Devi, and these were Myra Paibis, all 4 or 5 of them who came to meet us, and they all cried, and we also cried, because, they were in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and some younger women, but they were basically leading. And then we saw the film which was taken by a certain organization called Northeastern Network, and we saw what the scene that happened there. They were asking for some, we also were at that time trying to meet this girl, what's her name?
Irom
Sharmila. We were trying to meet her, and nobody was allowed to meet her at that time. Then at that time, the Kangla fort was going to be opened. It was a great occasion. The whole of Imphal was all there, and the Prime Minister had come to Imphal. So at that time, since I am the establishment, and yet I so much identified them that I was able to take these women to meet the Prime Minister. And the Prime Minister listened to them with great empathy, and they spoke their heart. Mm-hmm. And I felt that, I acted as a bridge.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gunjan, the Irom Sharmila, it's more than a decade that she's been on that drip. People make a big hue and cry when Anna Hazare goes on a fast here in New Delhi, in the nation's capital. There's less, I should say, excitement in the national media about Irom Sharmila and the cause for which she has been fasting now for a decade. Now, how do you see this kind of dichotomy between the different Indias? The India which you see in the national capital, the India that you see in Imphal, and the protests of a person like Irom Sharmila, which is hardly sort of makes a wave in the city that you and I live in.
It's very sad, but I think the unfortunate truth is that one of the reasons Anna Hazare's movement is getting so much of support, and nobody knows, or very few people know about Irom Sharmila, is simply because sitting in Delhi, you and I don't experience the Armed Forces Special Powers Act or its effects. We are not dragged out of our homes. Our loved ones are not killed. They're not raped. When Anna Hazare talks of corruption, it affects me every day. And so, I raise a voice against it. I think it's very unfortunate, but since we don't experience what is happening there, we don't even know. I mean, the people who know about it, when I tell people or when people hear about it, they get a shock, oh my God. But the same people are actually not willing to take a day off work and come and sit in support of Irom Sharmila when she comes to Delhi. And she's come to Delhi.
Yes.
She's sat at Jantar Mantar. But where were the crowds then? Mm-hmm. They were not there because somehow it doesn't affect them. And they're not, it's very sad. But I think somewhere we've stopped bothering about things which don't immediately impact us.
Syeda ji, are you surprised that there are so many people in the northeastern part of India who don't really belong to, quote unquote, the mainstream? Are you surprised that they feel so far physically and mentally and emotionally and psychologically from New Delhi? I mean, you talk in your book about little children in the northeastern states like Arunachal Pradesh. They walk for days and days to reach, their educational institution where they can appear for examination. And you talk about people who are doing great work, selfless individuals who serve these people who live in remote areas. But there's so little awareness of their lives here in this city.
I mean, even just the other day when people were pulled out of autos when anybody who looked Tibetan, it could be a northeasterner because of the Chinese premier's visit. They pulled out of autos and asked to identify themselves. This is very recent, but I find that the love, for example, in Arunachal Pradesh, everyone speaks beautiful Hindi. I mean, it's amazing. They just speak. They love to speak Hindi, and
it's their second language after their local language.
Yeah, but they hardly speak. They just speak very good Hindi. And in Vijayanagar, which is I don't think anyone goes to Vijayanagar. In fact, the MLA from that area went back after 3 years because we went in a helicopter to Vijayanagar. And this boy who was blind, he asked to sing for us. And he beautifully sang, and it still brings tears to my eyes, Ye Bharat Desh Hai Mera. You know, and there is a sentiment, there's a feeling, the Gaon Buddhas have a feeling for India. And yet, what do we feel for them? That is why I think when we plan for big states like Bihar, like Maharashtra, like Orissa, like UP, how can we forget that every single individual in Arunachal Pradesh is looking up to us, so that our planning doesn't just become an exercise, but it actually even targets and focuses.
Since we are on the Northeast, Gunjan, and since you've also worked there, let me ask you this question. There's a view that the money that comes from Delhi goes to an elite, a small set of people who have a vested interest, and they are the recipients of big bucks. Or they are the contractors, they are the politicians, they are the netas, they are the babus, and they appropriate huge amounts of money that moves from New Delhi to Itanagar and Kohima and Imphal and Aizawl and you name it, Agartala and all these places. And what that has created is a powerful elite which owes its allegiance to India. But you see a huge amount of absence of development, corruption, and the money not being spent, to use Planning Commission jargon, intended beneficiaries do not reach, the funds do not reach the intended beneficiary. Yes.
Absolutely. You know, the first time I went to Imphal, I was shocked because there were all these rickshawalas who drive around Imphal and they had their faces covered. And I kept wondering, why would they do that? They had these half masks, you could just see their eyes and nothing else. And it was, you know, the Manorma killing had just happened, everything was under band and curfew. And for one instance, I thought that in my ignorance, I thought maybe these are from the underground. Why will they cover their faces? And then I learned that these are actually youngsters, children who have master's degrees, some of them had done their PhDs. They were graduates and postgraduates who had no work. They had nothing to do. And so they were forced to pull rickshaws. And they were so ashamed of it that they were covering their faces. In Manipur, I was speaking to the defense people there. And they said most of the groups there are over 22 underground. They are nothing more than 3 or 4 young boys who come together. Since they have nothing to do, they get a gun, they control half a kilometer of the road, they take money on that. And that's it. Because there is nothing for them. They have no jobs, no companies are working, no company wants to open an office there because they have to pay money to the groups and because of the rampant corruption. So you're absolutely right.
You know, I'm linking this to a point she said, Saida ji. You went to Chhattisgarh. You've seen how there are some selfless individuals, doctors who could have been here in Delhi earning big bucks at the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, all through private practice. But they're sacrificed. I mean, they've given back much more than what the state has given to them in the form of an education. Most of the graduates of AIIMS go to the other parts of the world, the United States. They work there. But what you're seeing there is the huge development deficit. You see left-wing extremism at its peak. And we seem to have entered into a vicious cycle. Law and order, development. Law and order, development. You can't build roads, you don't have mobile towers, you can't provide schools, healthcare, education. That's why you have left-wing extremism. And then you say, no, we can't build roads, we can't have educational institutions, we can't have healthcare because of left-wing extremism. And this is kind of feeding into each other, and we seem to have entered into a vicious cycle in places like Chhattisgarh.
Yeah.
Yes,
I think that's really why the book, because what you say that most of these AIMS graduates, they go elsewhere. Nobody wants to go and live in Ganyari. And Ganyari is 2-3 hours from Raipur, from Bilaspur. And it's really a dusty place, but they have turned it into the most user-friendly, dignified place where the poorest of tribals, they come for their ilaj. अब आप ये देखिए कि उसके साथ जो गवर्नमेंट PHC है वो खाली पड़ा हुआ है और एक बहुत ऑर्डरली अंदाज में उन्होंने कोई पुरानी बिल्डिंग को लीज पे लेके रेनोवेट करके वहां एक डिग्निफाइड इलाज दिया है गांव के लोगों को जो ट्राइबल्स जिन तक हम लोग पहुंच ही नहीं सकते. और वहां से भी आगे अचानक मार फॉरेस्ट में कहीं उन्होंने बच्चों के लिए फूलवाड़ियां बनाई हैं, कहीं उन्होंने अपना आउटरीच बनाया है. एंड दे हैव द वंडरफुल थिंग दैट दे हैव डन इज कि गांव की जो औरतें हैं, दोज भील एंड दोज ट्राइबल वुमेन, द गोंड एंड द भील वुमेन, पूरे ज्वेलरी, they are wearing jewelry from head to foot, but they are efficiently doing the job of ANMs, nurses, whatever is needed in paramedical, they are doing it.
Okay.
So the point is that we'll have to use what we actually have available. We cannot create that human resource for the whole country in a flash.
Okay. I take one more break in our discussion. We're about halfway through our discussion. Since you're talking about women, I want you to talk about the experience that you've had in different parts of the country. Gadchiroli, Maharashtra, once again known for its left-wing extremism. You look at when you worked with sex workers in Benares, in Tamil Nadu, you know. So let's talk about how women, despite the adverse circumstances under which they live, and without any support really from government, how they've been able to empower themselves. Let's discuss some of these examples in the next segment, and I'll come back to both of you. We are looking at how ordinary, unsung Indians have been able to overcome the circumstances of their birth and their social economic conditions to do work that is truly extraordinary. We'll be back with you in a short while.